and I would like to talk to you today about some advanced patterns and best practices when using JEP. A couple of quick facts about myself. At the top over there, you have my Twitter handle. You can follow me. Why do I believe that I'm qualified to give this talk? I've been around the Groovy community for a while now. I've been using JEP since 2011, so just a year after it has been conceived by Luke Daly, and I'm the project lead since 2014. Okay, so I'm going to start the talk with a shameless plug. I would like to thank one of the sponsors of this conference, namely Energized Work. So Energized Work are a bunch of no-nonsense people who are focused on delivering business value to their customers when designing and developing software using XP and Agile methodologies. So if you are based in or around London, or you are thinking to move over there, even though after what has happened on Wednesday, please grab me after the talk. There's also Gayatri and Aaron with me. They are also from EW. Feel free to grab them and talk about potential opportunities. Okay, let's start with a bit of old news. 1.0 finally happened. Hey, it's really old news. It's half a year. It happened half a year ago in October 2016. So JEP has been there 1.0 ready for probably a couple of years already, and a lot of people were using it. But as a lead, you always want to squeeze in that last feature before 1.0 or make this breaking change before 1.0. So that's why JEP ended with 0.10 releases, 0.12 and 0.13. But finally, it's got there. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the 50 of JEP contributors. That's the full list of everyone who contributed to JEP. That list is coming from the last chapter of the book of JEP. If your name is not there yet, I would encourage you to contribute. I think it's not hard. Maybe I'm a bit biased, but I believe that JEP's code base is fairly small, so it shouldn't be that hard. There is a contributing markdown file in the root of the repository, which lays out how to get started when you want to contribute something. Have a look at the issue tracker and make your name known and put it on this list. Okay, so I was meant to ask who's using JEP over here, because this is majority, the great majority of people. This talk will not be about introduction. I assume that you have certain knowledge, and I would even say proficiency in JEP. What I want to talk about today is more good practices and taking your JEP tests to the next level. Another question: who's using 1.0 or newer? Okay, not too many people actually. So it's probably worth mentioning what were the major breaking changes in 1.0. So a couple of methods, like for example, is displayed and text, used to return the result of the operation on the first element of a multi-element navigator. What happens now is that they throw an exception when you are calling these methods on a multi-element navigator. Why is that? I've noticed that a lot of people struggled with problems. They would come over to the mailing list and they would ask questions, and then when I was helping them out, we figured out quite often that they were actually calling these methods on a multi-element navigator. They were not aware that their selectors are selecting more than one element, which caused confusion and problems. So I will show you later how to call these methods on multi-element navigators. It's possible, but now if you just plainly call these methods on multi-element navigators, these methods will fail and throw an exception. There were weakly typed versions of module and module lists. These methods were available in the content DSL. By weakly type, I mean you would be passing in a module class to a method call, and you would be passing in a map of properties for that module, and then JEP would initialize it for you. But I think a better pattern is to actually initialize the module yourself. So call a constructor, set all the properties, and then pass it on to Jeb. So now you can you do it this way. So instead of passing maps around, you are actually passing fully initialized objects. And these two methods have also been moved out of the content DSL, and they have been moved onto Navigator. So now you can use these methods not only in content DSL, but you can call these methods to get a Navigator and turn it into a module. Finally, is disabled and is read-only methods have been removed from Navigator and moved into a form module. There is a new class called form module in Jeb, a form module. And this is because these methods were really specific to form inputs, for form controls. And in my opinion, it wasn't the right place for these methods to live on the Navigator. So a bit of a heads up for you. It kind of feels wrong to be talking about what I'm going to talk about at a conference, which is about a primarily dynamic language for the JVM, and when I'm talking about a project which is using loads of dynamic features of that language. But I will advise you to strongly type your Jeb specs. This is by no means to make the compiler happy or find any compilation errors early or anything like that. I will not tell you why at the moment to keep you focused and try to figure out from the rest of the presentation. So yeah, let's move on. It's basically what you know at the moment as the idiomatic way of using Jeb, where you have implicit page backing your test. That's, in my opinion, not the best way to write your tests anymore. So let's start with some tips and tricks and things you might not know about Jeb, but which you could utilize in your specs. So first of all, module is a navigator. It hasn't always been the case that module class implemented the navigator interface, but since 0.9.3, it is the case. What does that mean? That basically means that you can call any navigator methods on module instances. And what happens is actually these navigator methods are being delegated to the base navigator of the module. Yeah. So over here we have some HTML. We have a form element. We declare a module that declares a base to point at this form element, and we have a simple page that declares a form content element, which is an instance of this module. Yeah. So what you can do then, you can basically, when you're at the login page, you can call any method from the navigator. So this is actually calling the isDisplayed method of a navigator on a module element. On a module instance. You can also, for example, use the attribute getter shortcut, basically. So this expression, if you know Jeb well, you will know that this actually is a call to get attr of method. Yeah. So it gives you the value of the method attribute of the module, or it's actually its base navigator. It's worth keeping in mind. I think it makes for your, it can help to keep your tests clean if you keep that in mind. But it also opens additional opportunities. So what we have over here is a date picker module, and what we're doing over here, we are overloading the value method that returns a value of a navigator. In this case, a module, which is a navigator. And we are overloading the value method, which allows you to set the value on the navigator. These methods are used in Jeb to access values of form elements, usually. But what we are doing over here is we are building an abstraction because the date picker will allow us to to select dates, right? So we don't want to be dealing with strings. We don't want to be dealing with numbers. When we are dealing with this date picker module, we want to be dealing with dates instead, right? So we've got a simple page over here that declares a content of that date picker module type, and then I think it basically reads better, and it's better than using, you know, assuming that there is a, you could pass 2017-4-1 into this method as a string instead of using dates. But I think it's better because you don't have to assume a certain format of your dates in your code, and you are dealing with dates are structured objects. Let's not use primitive types for things that are not actually primitive types. Yeah, and the example over here, it just takes this to the next level. We are using content definition value shortcuts over here. So basically, this under the hood will actually call the value method and pass the data as the argument to it. And this will actually be equivalent to calling date.value on this when we do stuff like that. This is basically utilizing the JEP sugar by overloading the value method on the date picker module. We have utilized the sugar over here that JEPs provides you when you are setting and reading values of navigators and elements. Okay, so you probably know that if the URL of your page is parameterized, you can overload the convert to path method. This is the method which gets everything that you pass, all the arguments after the page class you pass to methods like browser to or browser via. So basically, you can pass parameters there, and then they are converted to path of the URL, and the browser goes to that URL. The default implementation just basically calls toString on whatever you pass to the to method as additional arguments, and then concatenates them using slashes. So what I'm suggesting here is you could think of converting, overloading convert to path, and then not using, you know, primitives like objects, but structured types that describe what your pages are about. Yeah. So over here we have a page that renders a post, a blog post, say, and it has a quite convoluted URL path structure, right? So instead of using the default implementation of convert to path and then passing some horrible code every single time you navigate to the post page, we can just simplify that and just pass a structured object that represents this page, and then let the page itself deal with actually what the URL for that page is. Yeah, so we are moving some fairly ugly code from your tests, which should always be as readable as possible, down into your page, and it's actually page's responsibility to know how to get to itself instead of it being a test responsibility. But what if you want to parameterize the implementation of your page to a greater extent than just when it comes to figuring out what the URL is for that page? So in the past, the via, to, and at methods of browser, you could only pass page classes to them. But that has recently changed, and now you can you can also pass page instances to them. So you can initialize your page, set its properties to whatever you want. So in essence, parameterize that page, and then you can pass it to these methods so that JEP navigates to the correct URL. So an example of that, I'm gonna still deal with the URL, even though I could parameterize any method in my page based on the use this field to have some logic based on what the value of the post actually is. I'm just going to stick to the page URL story still. So what we are doing over here is, instead of actually, when you're navigating to the post page, instead of then passing the post as the next arguments over here, we create a parameterized instance of the post page, and we pass the post to it. Yeah, and then in the get page URL, we are overloading get page URL. So by default, that method on the page in JEP, it returns the value of the static URL property of your pages. So that the regular way when you say like, oh, if I'm going to a list of posts, the static URL equals string posts, right? So that's how the URL is determined. So we are overloading that, and we're putting all of the nasty logic, complex logic to determine the URL over here. So again, your test, because that's the code that's going to probably end up in your test, is cleaner, and it opens up additional possibilities to you. I'm not sure if you are aware, but navigators are iterable. So navigators are basically wrappers around collection of web elements, and they have a relatively rich interface compared to what you can do with WebDriver's web elements. So it is kind of obvious that if it's backed by a collection, we should be able to iterate over that. One important note is that it is not iterable of web elements, but navigators are iterable of navigators. So it means basically when you have a multi-element navigator and you iterate over it, you're going to iterate over single element navigators instead of web elements, right? And why the fact that navigators are iterable is so important? Because Groovy declares loads of really cool and useful methods on the iterable interface, which means that basically whatever you can do with iterables with Groovy, you can also do the same thing with navigators. Yeah, so let's look at an example. We have 2 paragraphs, and we are creating navigators for that will contain both of these paragraphs every single time. So I've mentioned to you that at the moment when you try to call text, in latest JEP basically, when you try to call text on a multi-element navigator, that's going to throw an exception. But there are ways around it. So if you know that actually you are dealing with a multi-element navigator, you can either change that multi-element navigator to be a single element navigator by using a subscript operator, for example. You could also call .first on it, .last, endless possibilities, because all these methods are declared on iterable in Groovy, so you can call all of these methods, right? The fact that navigators are iterable give you the possibility to actually use the spread operators on them as well, right? So if you wanted to get text of all of the elements in that given navigator, you can use the spread operator, and that's your result. Yeah. So when you are dealing with multi-element navigators, and you need to call methods like isDisplay, text, and so on, just either transform it to be a single element navigator or just use the spread operator on it. Finally, an example of a method from Groovy, which is declared on the iterable interface with index, which basically takes an iterable and transforms it into a list of tuples. Tuples when basically the first element of the tuple is basically an element of the iterable, and the second element of the tuple is the index. Yeah, and so then we can basically take it further and transform that list into a map, which maps as the index into the text of the element. Just as an example, opportunities here are endless. Okay, so who has ever overloaded onLoad on a page in JEP? Yay, that does not surprise me at all. For a long time, I myself was wondering what's the point of this method. It seems like such a use case. So what is this method about? Basically, this method gets called every single time a page instance is being set on the browser after you call, after you pass that page to browser methods such like to, via, or at. So I just wanted to share a use case with you about that. So on my previous project, thanks to European Union, now we have to put these really, really annoying bars telling you that this site is using cookies, and you have to click on it and so on. So I worked on a site that had such a cookie bar, and because it was floating, it was sometimes it was being rendered on top of other elements. And when our tests were trying to interact with these elements that were underneath the cookie bar, we would get test failures. So what could you do? You could try to scroll every single time and just pray for the best so that the cookie bar doesn't overlay the element that you are trying to interact with. Or you could basically override the onLoad method and close the cookie bar as soon as the page basically loads and it's set on the browser object. So if there is a cookie bar, just close the cookie bar and be done with it. So this became a base page for all of the pages on which cookie bar has been rendered. So we also needed to parameterize this page to be able to actually test that the cookie bar is there. We had a couple of tests where we were testing that, the cookie bar is rendered, and if you close it, then you reload the page, it doesn't show up again and stuff like that. So we wanted to be able to do that. We just have a parameter here, and we would just basically instantiate our pages, set auto close cookie bar to false before passing it on to method or the via method, and that would mean that the cookie bar would not be closed in that case. You probably know that WebDriver and hence JEP allows you to execute any custom JavaScript code inside of the browser on the page that you are testing. So that's probably nothing new for you, but what is important, it again opens up loads of opportunities. So for example, you're testing a page that doesn't have jQuery in the page, and I don't know, you need to use something in your test that is not possible via the UI, and you want to mock, or you're writing some kind of a gray box test, or you're just hacking around, and you say like, yep, I just want jQuery to be loaded as part of this page. So there's nothing stopping you from that. All you do is you just execute this bit of JavaScript over here, you create a script element, set the source attribute on that, and append it to the head, and then voila, the JavaScript code is loaded. What could be other use cases for this is, for example, using loading Synon.js into your pages. So Synon.js allows you to mock timers in JavaScript, and if you wanted to have, if you tested some time-sensitive JavaScript code in your browser, you could, for example, use that to inject Synon.js into pages. I don't know if that's visible from the back. It's a bit of a small font, this one. But what this method is about is again a method I've written in the past, allowing me. So you know that in CSS you can have transitions, which basically take time. And when the transitions are happening, you don't really want to be interacting with your UI, because things are moving. You're going to click on the wrong thing. You can get errors and stuff like that. So basically, what this method allows you is, given some kind of a trigger. So for example, clicking on a button, it will basically wait for the CSS transition to happen on the Navigator. Say, I don't know, a paragraph that opens up after you click on that button. And it has a couple of, it also takes a couple of dependencies that it needs to perform its job. But basically, it allows you for that transition to finish before you continue executing your JEP code. What is important over here is remember that you can access Navigator's element inside of JavaScript, right? So instead of having to duplicate your code, you have selected your really complex CSS selector, selected some Navigator, and now you have to do something inside in JavaScript on elements of that Navigator. Instead of having to do that selection all over again in JavaScript, what you can do is you can pass web element instances as an argument to JavaScript executor, and then they will magically become DOM elements in your JavaScript. Yeah. So this functionality, this behavior is also used in JEP's jQuery support. So if you've used that in the past, this is basically how it works. You get a selector, and then underneath, when you call navigator dot jQuery dot something, so in the jQuery bit, it goes in and it actually creates a jQuery object this way by taking Navigator elements, passing them to JavaScript, and then wrapping it around the jQuery object. So next bit, I think as developers, especially junior ones, we are abusing inheritance for code sharing, and I'm to blame for that myself. I've done it the wrong way for many, many years. But if things are not logically part of an inheritance structure, they should not inherit from each other. Yeah. So Groovy gives us a couple of ways to do code sharing in a better way than through inheritance. First of it is using delegation. And thanks to Groovy's delegate annotation, it is extremely easy. And since Groovy 2.2, we can also use traits for sharing code. So I'm talking about it because when you end up with quite a complex inheritance structure of your pages or of your modules, then it's probably worth thinking about it again and seeing what you can do to actually simplify that. And if you do, create that complex inheritance structure just to be able to share the code between your components, then maybe there are better ways. Okay, so this is an example of how you would use delegation for code sharing with JEP. So to take on the previous example of waiting for CSS transitions, in this case, what we would want to be able to do is we would want to be able to call this method on a module. Yeah. So what do? We declare all of the dependencies of this method. We create a delegate that will perform the waiting for CSS transition, and then we add a property. We initialize that property, that delegate property, and we annotate it with delegate, which means that Groovy will actually generate a wait for CSS transition that takes a closure method on our module, right? And then we can basically mix it into many modules that way, which are completely unrelated to each other, apart from the fact that they have CSS transitions on them. Same thing with traits. So module, as I told you, it implements Navigator. It also implements waiting support. So traits in Groovy can extend interfaces. They can also declare abstract methods. So we declare the get.js method, an abstract one over here, because we need the JavaScript interface to be able to perform our waiting for CSS transition. And because module implements Navigator and waiting support, and it has the get.js method that returns the JavaScript interface, we can then basically mix in our transition support trait into it. Okay, so for a very long time, I used to only concentrate on when I was configuring JEP. You probably know the JEP config.groovy file, that this is the way to configure things in JEP. So you should remember that that's not the only way you can do it. You can also change configuration at runtime. In this example over here, we are changing every single of our tests will have a different base URL. When we are dealing with projects like Ratpack, for example, which starts the application under test on a different port each time, so that you can run multiple tests in parallel that way, because they don't have a shared resource. They don't use the same port, which means that there can be as many applications under test as we want running at the same time. So when this is happening, what you can do when you're testing application written in a framework like that, I know that Spring Boot also allows you to start up on the random server, sorry, on the random port for tests. You can basically, after this starts, you can basically set the base URL of your test this way. If you want to change other bits and bobs of the configuration, there is config property on the browser object, which you can access, and it's of type configuration, and it has many methods that allow you to change configuration at runtime. Let's talk about testing responsive apps. So what are responsive apps? So responsive apps are apps which render different UI based on the size of the window in which they display, in which they render. So over here we have an example of how. So basically, if you want to test a mobile view of an application, all that you need to do is take your browser window that you're driving and resize it, right? So we have a Spock extension over here that is driven using a test mobile view annotation, and then basically when you put this annotation onto a test method, onto a feature method, it adds an interceptor, grabs hold of the current window, WebDriver window, saves its original size, resizes it. In this case, it's hard-coded to be iPhone 5, for example, but depending on what devices you support and what viewport sizes you support, that might be different. And then you allow the test, the feature to proceed, execute, and then after you're done, you just revert to the original size. So basically, by default, you're testing the app in the desktop view, so you want to go back. Okay, so let's move on to best practices. This is just a bunch of what I found out when using JEP over the years. Hopefully, this is not too controversial, and you can agree with most of it. I mentioned that initially, so I want to ask you to give it a try. So think about strongly typing your JEP code, JEP specs. Why would you want to do that? Because if your IDE understands the code, and if it's not dynamic, then it can give you auto-completion. It can give you better navigation. You can drill into methods by control-clicking on it and stuff like that. And you can actually refactor your JEP tests if they are written in this way. So what do you get for free from if you're using IntelliJ? IntelliJ actually understands that missing methods and properties called from within a spec are delegated by JEP onto the browser object. And it also understands, so basically you don't have to say browser.to in your specs. If you do to and you pass a class to that method call, IntelliJ will understand that, that you are calling that method on browser. It also understands that things that are not found on browser are being delegated onto the page. So you can say get title in your spec, and IntelliJ will understand which method you are actually calling. It also, which is pretty cool, understands that content definitions are exposed as properties of the classes, of the page classes they are defined on. So what you have to do to achieve full auto-completion refactoring, support of your JEP tests, better navigation, you have to track the type of the current page explicitly in your JEP tests. So the key to it is the fact that via to and at methods of the browser have generic signatures, and they return an instance of the type that you pass to them. Yeah. So what you need to do is then take whatever these methods return, assign it to a local variable, and then call methods and access properties on pages via that variable in the future. This will basically mean that IntelliJ will understand that you are dealing with this type of page or that type of page, instead of having to deal with some kind of an implicit page type that is currently set on the browser. You also should return page instances from methods on modules and pages that perform page transitions. So how does that look? As I told you, the to method will return an instance of the type you pass to it, so it returns an instance of a home page. You don't have to put the type on the left-hand side over here, because IntelliJ will be able to infer the fact that this is actually of type homepage. Then when you start saying homepage.login, it will autocomplete for you. It will know that there is a login page link content property on the homepage, and that it's Navigator, so it will autocomplete the click method for you. Yeah. Then you know that you go to a login page after you click on the login page link. So again, we are using the value returned by the at method and captured as a local variable. And finally, we have a login method that basically sets a couple of input values, click submit, and because it goes to a different page after clicking submit, it returns an instance of the next page it goes to. So this is verbose. Initially, it was very verbose for me as well. When I started doing that, it felt wrong. But we gave it a try on my previous project, and we never looked back. The benefits are so big that I think that it's actually worth doing it this way and living with your specs being slightly more verbose. This also helps readability of your specs, which means that you look at this code and you can quite quickly figure out what the current type is at any point, what the current page type is at any point of execution of this code, right? So you don't have to deal as a developer with this implicit page type, which you don't know. Am I now on the login page? Am I on a home page? What is this property? Is it a content property? Is it something else? Is it a module? So you automatically see what your code is doing. I think that's a big benefit. You could take it to a next level, let's say, by chaining things together. So if you really don't want to be tracking and having a lot of this page variables per every single page type you go through in your test, you could chain things a bit, yeah. But be careful with this, because by chaining things and not being explicit, you again make it harder for other developers to understand where actually page transitions happen, and it's harder for them to figure out. And you are again creating this implicit page type context that as a developer we have to deal with. Quickly on at checks, keep them simple. They are just to detect if you are at the current page. If you have any page-related logic in your at checks, you are doing it wrong, right? So if you have a parameterized page and then you're checking that for given that parameter of the page, there are 3 elements in that, 3 table rows in that page, that's not the code that should go into your at checks, because at checks are executed very often, and you don't want to be testing the same thing over and over again. Another thing is, in your at checks, try to structure them in a way that basically when an at check fails, you're going to get a good error reporting. So try to, for example, deal with page titles. So when your at check fails because you wanted to go to the login page and you ended up at the error page, you will see that the title is not logging, but it is error. Okay, quick question to you, to keep you all awake. What's missing over here? To help you out, there is an abstraction missing. What kind of abstraction is missing over here? Exactly. If you find that your page has a couple of content elements with the same prefix, right? You're just treating something that is a module in a flat way. So this is a kind of a smell to look out for in your pages. If you have a couple of content elements that start with the same prefix, you should use a module. Modules are, in the book of JEP, modules are advertised as being useful for code reuse, but I would like to say, what I would like to tell you is I think that they are also useful when you're dealing with logical components, even if they are only used single time on a single page. You should really wrap it into a module, because that way it allows you to keep your test simpler, hide the structure of a complex component and from the test, and also hides complex interactions from the test. Another big one, not really JEP related, is fixture builders. So if your functional test suites grow, you really want to be able to have a really easy way to set up the data for your test, to set up the state of the application under test that you're testing, to be able to test what you actually want to test. So I think you should keep data set up as close to this as possible. So a massive fixture reused by all of the tests is not a way to do it. You're going to end up having problems with, I'm just going to change this object over here in this fixture, and then 50 of your tests will be failing because they depend on some of the property of that object. Only set up the data necessary for the test. Because if you do more test setup around your test, and it's not necessary, you are clouding the environment for other developers who are going to come in and try to read that test and change it, and it's going to be just not nice for them. Groovy remote control comes to the rescue. Unfortunately, with Codehouse the Miss, all the documentation for Groovy remote control is gone. There are some examples of how to use it in Ratpack codebase, so you can look over there. And Groovy remote control is fairly easy to integrate with any framework. I have recently integrated that into a Drop Wizard application, and I'm using it to bootstrap my test. So it's a very cool thing when you're dealing with test fixtures. Have a look at it in your free time. I'm going to skip over examples just quickly on this one. So test fixture builders are not only about data, they can be about any other thing. So for example, in JEP codebase, we have this fixture which allows us to declare some HTML that is then served for the test from an in-memory HTTP server, and then we can easily do stuff like that. You'll want to use real browsers in your CI. So there are a couple of headless browsers, but they actually aren't any good. And I would advise you, if you used JEP for a while, you'll probably know that it's just not worth it. The way to do it is either use a virtual frame buffer on your CI, so XVFB, and then run your regular browser that you're driving for your tests with display pointing at an XVFB created display, or use a cloud browser provider like Sauce Labs or what's the other one, Browser Stack. I'm going to skip that one. Okay, who can tell me when wait for should be used in JEP? Come on, you should know that.
You have some Ajax code which will render stuff as
Exactly. Asynchronously is the key word over here. So whenever you're dealing with anything asynchronous in your code, so be it Ajax calls, set timeout calls, anything like that, you should wait for the thing to happen. And you should be really you should be really careful and ask yourself every single time you're performing an action in your test, is this action going to trigger anything asynchronous? Should I wait for that action to finish? And it's extremely tricky if your asynchronous actions are really quick on your developer machine. So it seems to you like, oh, I don't need to wait for that stuff. But then it goes to your CI, which is slightly slower, and your tests start failing. So be very vigilant when you're writing your tests to look and search for things that are happening asynchronously. I'm afraid I have run out of time, so I'll have to skip to questions. I covered the most important bits I wanted to cover today, but do we have any questions?
Does a browser in a Docker file counts as a real browser?
Yes, definitely. You're just running a Chrome, a regular Chrome browser in a Docker file, right? And it is actually probably the way it's implemented is because the Docker doesn't have a real display. So probably the way the Docker file with Chrome running in it, the Docker image is set up is actually using XVFB under the covers, which I mentioned. So a virtual frame buffer, and then it starts up Chrome to point its display at that virtual display, and that's how it can run the test. If you were at Kevin's presentation yesterday, he showed how to do it, and he actually used VNC to connect into that. So he wasn't connecting into he was connecting into one of the displays via VNC in a Docker container. Okay, thank you very much.